Hello, everybody, and welcome to Yoshi One Kenobi's metagame predictions for Zendikar Rising. Now, in this video, I'm going to go over what I think are going to be the top 3 decks in the metagame for Zendikar Rising. Of course, it's just speculation, and the goal is to get you guys talking in the chat and telling me where I'm wrong, where I'm right, what you think are going to be the big decks in standards. But for now, this is the absolute truth. The top 3 decks of Standard in Zendikar Rising are going to be... Well, the first deck is going to be an Omnat Shell. So a deck that gets to play Omnat, that gets to play Felidar Retreat, and gets to play Urros all mashed together. You play a bunch of powerful cards together, and you get a broken deck. That's typically what has happened, and that has typically formed around Urro. It's all about finding the best Urro shell. So there's a couple of different ways to build this deck. You can build it in the same way as Field of the Dead used to be built, and play some Shatter Disguise, play some Removal, play some Felidar Retreat, and eventually win the game by playing lands with some control element. That's not the road that I'm taking. So I want to use the synergies of the deck. So Jalrael is very strong whenever you have draw card effects. So we've seen the synergy with Uro. So Jalrael plus Uro, very strong. We're playing 4 Uros. We're also playing 4 Omnats, which are the centerpieces of our deck. And Omnat draws a card when you play it, triggering Jalrael, making it 2/2. Just powerful enabler that's going to hold the ground early on in the game. We're playing Lotus Cobra because it's a good mana dork. Except that it costs 2 mana. But you have it on turn 2, you play a land on turn 3, you play Omnat on turn 3, or you play your Felidar Retreat. Just very powerful. Also, if you have an Evolving Wild, so you would not hit that turn untapped land drop, you crack the Evolving Wild, that's 2 lands entering the battlefield, that's 2 mana from the Cobra, which means you get to play Omnat on turn 4, or Felidar Retreat. Not sure which one's stronger, as they're both really strong. So that's why we play Lotus Cobras. Then we play Murasa Rootgrazer, because it ramps as well. Play a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Also, if you run out of lands late game, you can just bounce one to your hand, play it again, trigger landfall. Then we play our 3-drops. Urros, Cultivate, same thing. Double land, double success. As long as you have a Felidar Retreat or an Omnat, you're good to go. Or an Urro. Then we play this little cute card, Scute Swarm. And Scute Swarm is very powerful. It's basically a pack rat or a Krenko mob boss type of effect that scales exponentially as long as you keep on playing lands if you have 6 lands or more in play. If you only have 3 lands in play and you cast it on turn 3, still going to generate 1 or 2 1/1s along the way. You play it on turn 3, you play a land. Turn 4, you cultivate. You're up to 6. Suddenly you have 4 creatures on the battlefield. And that's fairly powerful for a 3-drop. Originally I thought it was 4 and I didn't really consider it, but for 3 mana, it's a fairly strong effect. Especially once you consider the late game scaling that's exponential. Overall, I think this deck is very powerful. Also, take a quick look at the mana base. We are playing 4 copies of Seagate Restoration. Seagate Restoration is part of the deck because of Omnat, among other things. If you have Omnat on the battlefield, and you play an Evolving Wild or Fabled Passage, you get the double land triggers, which means Omnat generates 4 mana. What can we do with that? Well, we can play Scute Swarm or a Felidar Retreat and keep Counterspell mana up for next turn. Ridiculously powerful. Or, if we have 4 mana in play, we play the 2 lands, we generate that 4 mana, we now have enough mana to actually play the Seagate Restoration and draw a whole bunch of cards. And so we're doing that like on turn 5. So we're casting Seagate Restoration on turn 5, hopefully drawing 4 or 5 cards, which should be an advantage big enough to win us the game, regardless of what our opponent tries to do. And that's the list. Play Uro, play Omnat, play Felidar Retreat, hold back a little bit of counter magic, or don't just play it out and crush your opponent with powerful threats. And this is what I think is going to be my candidate for the Tier 1 deck of Zendikar Rising. The next deck I want to talk about, which I think is going to be high tier as well, is Mono Black. Now there's an argument to make the deck Rakdos. Kroxa being one of the main arguments, but also Leyline Tyrant and Terror of the Peaks are very powerful red cards. But I would rather keep the list Mono Black because of 3 reasons. Land, Castle Lockvein, Agra Mauling, and Agadim's Awakening. 3 of the most powerful lands that have additional effects that we have available in Standard. So you get to play 28 lands, yet have 12 of those that we want to draw into the late game. And keep on drawing good stuff. So all we need is a good shell that has a solid curve, and we can generate the advantage and the consistency from our mana base. So what do we have? We can play Skyclave Shade, which is very good at just keep on coming back, especially since we're playing 28 lands, some of these with good abilities. We can also do a neat trick with Rankle. So Rankle allows us to sacrifice a creature for both players. But Skyclave Shade is almost free to sacrifice, because we can just play a land, pay 2, and bring it back. So you get to put your opponent in kind of a lock with Rankle and Skyclave Shade. And you keep on reviving and sacking your Skyclave Shade, and as long as your opponent only has 1 creature to play every turn, they can't get out of that loop. Unless it's a flyer that can block Rankle, of course. So Skyclave Shade, good utility over there. Not to mention it's just good by itself. Null Priest of Oblivion, a 2/1 Menace lifelink for 2. That's pretty good. That you can kick to revive a big creature? That's really good, especially with the amount of lands we're playing. Good at holding the fort early, good at winning the game late game. That's what I like. For Agonizing Remorses, well, Thought Eraser's out. Agonizing Remorses are in. Don't even need to splash some blue. So we're playing 4 of those. For Murderous Rider, one of the best and most versatile kill spell in the format. We're playing the 4 Rankles for the reason mentioned before. The 1 Erebos, because we're in mono black. So why not? It's a good card. We don't want to draw too many of those, though. Then the 2 Vetoes and the 3 Grey Merchants. We're playing those because they go hand in hand and they're very strong together. Veto basically doubles the damage dealt by Grey Merchant. And since we're playing these 4 copies of Agadim's Awakening, we can easily, in the late game, revive a Veto, a Grey, a 2-drop, maybe even a Rankle, and just drain our opponent immediately. So there's some nice combo-ish potential over there. We're playing Drana the Last Blood Chief because it's a very powerful card. It doesn't do anything when it enters the battlefield, but if it's not removed, it will wreak havoc on your opponent. And we're playing a 1-of copy of Massacre Worm, just because Agadim's Awakening targets 1 creature of each different mana cost. And we didn't have a 6, so we're playing 1. And Bloodchief's Thirst is kind of like a weak Fatal Push, where early game, it's a very effective removal against cheap threats. And late game, it turns into a versatile removal against anything. And we already have our 3 and 4 mana kill spells in Murderous Rider and Agra's Mauling, so Bloodchief Stirs gives us that early resilience against these aggressive decks. And because the deck is just so flexible and toolboxy, with some late game one-shot kills with a Grey Veto combo, I think this deck is well poised to be a high tier in the Zendikar Rising metagame. And the last high tier deck that I'm going to be talking about is the strongest aggro deck of the format, which is going to be Smashing Faces and that's Gruul Landfall. Why is that the best aggressive deck in the format? Because it's the deck that has the most powerful 1-drops. So it has virtually two powered 1-drops, which is hard to do in the other colors. Also, it's an aggressive deck that can play Gem Razor. And it's very important that your aggressive deck can play Gem Razor to deal with Felidar Retreat. Otherwise, you will get Field of the Deaded out of your aggressive strategy and hit a wall of zombie cats. Let's call them zombies for now. So let's get to the list. Akuma Hellhound, a 0-1, that's really a 2-3 attacker as long as you play a land during your turn. If you play an Evolving Wild, that's actually a 4-5. A very tempting Ember Cleavable target, and that's a 1-drop. Yes, that's right. Then we're playing Wildwood Tracker, which is a 1-1 that's going to become a 2-2 as long as you have another creature in play. Then we have Brushfire Elementals. Same thing with Landfall. They turn very big, very fast, have some unblockable capabilities so that they can be chum blocked easily. They're hasty threats. Very, very yummy. We're playing for Kazandu Mammoth. They're in land section, but they're still very big landfall creatures. That's landfall synergies. Then we're playing Bone Crusher Giants and Anax for resilience and removal, and they've proven that they're very good cards. In the red deck win strategy, we're playing 3 Ember Cleaves because Ember Cleave wins games on its own. And it's one of the primary reasons why we're playing green with red is for Ember Cleave. We're playing 3 copies of Primal Might to boost one of our creatures, kill one of theirs, a very powerful removal spell. 3 Questing Beast, because it's an okay 4-drop, has a wall of text longer than I can tell you about, and they're all positive effects. And Gem Razors. Gem Razor is a beauty in this deck. Also, Everquill Phoenix would be fairly good. Basically, Akuma Hellhound is really a 0-1. Wildwood Tracker is a 1-1 that'll get a boost. Brushfire Elemental is a 1-1. Anax spawns 1-1 tokens, so there's a lot of mutate targets. And those mutate targets still have landfall, and now they have trample. So you Gem Razor on top of your Akuma Hellhound, you attack with it. Well, actually, you play an Evolving Wild, you crack the Evolving Wild, bring another land, and suddenly your little 0-1 is now an 8-9 trample reach. Damage out of nowhere. That's a neat trick with the deck. You can accumulate your Evolving Wilds and Fabled Passage and crack them all at once to give your team ridiculous amount of stats boost, +6/+6, maybe even more. So even though we're an aggressive deck, we seem to be playing a lot of tap lands, but these tap lands are really just pump spells that also fix our mana, so they do a lot of things for us. We'll also have access to Shatter Skull Smashing or Turn Timber Symbiosis if we want to close out the games and the games go long. But really, this deck doesn't really want the games to go long. They want to smash your opponent quickly and take them down. So these are the decks that I think are going to be dominating the Zendikar Rising metagame. Tell me in my Yoshi here what you think of this video. Which decks do you think are going to win the metagame? Which decks did I completely miss out of my video? Which tweaks would you provide to some of the lists? What do you think? Uh, what do you think? Really? What would you like to see in some gameplay videos as the set is coming to Magic Arena extremely soon? I'm really looking forward to trying out some of these decks, trying out some really fancy and fun stuff, and we can revisit whether my list was right on the dot or completely wrong in a couple of weeks once we figure out how the metagame shapes up. So let me know what you think in the comments below.
I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe by clicking the Yoshi icon at the right of your screen. It doesn't cost you any mana, and it greatly helps to support this channel and keep the awesome videos coming.